Hi everyone, welcome to LinkedIn Live. Just give it a minute, enjoy the music, just while we wait people to come and join the live session today. Hi everyone, just welcome for a minute, enjoy the music. Too loud? Thank you. We'll just get everyone 30 seconds or so to join. Just settle in, take a breath for a minute, enjoy the music. We'll start very, very shortly. Welcome to LinkedIn Live in this Financial Literacy Month. Great. Well, welcome. I'm going to pass this off. Thank you for joining today. My name is Jacki Zehner. I write a newsletter on LinkedIn called She Money, and we're doing a LinkedIn Live every week for Financial Literacy Month. And this week, the topic is money plus kids. And if you missed last week's session, you can watch it on replay on our YouTube channel. Look for She Money Team. I think they're going to post it in the chat as well. After this week, we have one next week, April 17th. Next week, it's Money Plus Divorce with Jill Coyle, who is a divorce attorney and author. I love the name of this book, No One Dies from Divorce, and the founder of a company called Simple Endings. And then our final one will be on April 24th. That one will be Money Plus Fertility with documentary filmmaker Robin Hauser, who is working on a documentary feature film on this topic called Thaw, which explores the rising trend of elective egg freezing and its revolutionary impact on women's biological clocks. So that's what we have on tap for Financial Literacy Month here on LinkedIn. So this topic of money plus kids is near and dear to my heart. I have kids, and as they were growing up, I was looking for resources to help me raise them to be financially responsible, as we all do as parents. So I was a finance major. I had a 14-year career in financial services, and yet when it came to teaching my kids about money, there was nowhere in my background in an intentional way to really know how to do that, except for what I learned from my parents, which was great. I have to say I'm so grateful for that. And the values and the behaviors that my husband and I pulled together in our lives together and around our parenting. So it was in the early 2000s that I wanted to be way more intentional, that I found my way to an author named Jolene Godfrey. She is one of the OG in the kids and money space. And not only did I buy and cherish her book, Raising Financially Fit Kids, but we became friends. We did events together when I lived in New Canaan, Connecticut. And I learned so much from her and her work that I try to pull into practice in our own life. Highly, highly recommend the book. So some of the things that showed up for me from Jolene's teaching: the classic save, give, spend, jars with the kids' allowance. We talked about needs versus wants, not spending money we don't have on things we don't need. Have them create budgets, the importance of supporting causes that are meaningful to them, and so many more things. And the biggest thing that I pulled from my life, and I'm trying to do well with my kids, is including them in these money actions. We call them our money moves over here at She Money, and making it an active part of our lives together and a regular part of our lives together. And of course, we're going to talk more about this later. And as they got older, things got more complicated and our lives got way busier. And I think that's true for most families. Teaching kids about money requires that we know a lot about money. Teaching good money habits requires that we have good money habits. And bottom line, it's hard to teach what we don't know. And if we're not taught it, how do we figure out how to learn about it, even as adults, and pass those learnings and behaviors onto our children? And though I hate the term financial literacy, I much prefer financial capabilities, financial education, financial agency, financial engagement, and our favorite, financial wellness. The state of it overall in our country is not good. And we cannot make up necessarily for the lack of education. And it is clearly not the sole reason that people are in debt, that don't have money saved up for retirement. Not having enough money is not, and not being financially educated, is not necessarily the reason we don't have enough. Things are just way more expensive these days. But I think it's fair to say we all want to live in a world where all people are able to thrive. And money is an energy, a resource, a tool, gas in the tank, as we like to say, to make that happen. So that's why we're doing these webinars here on She Money. That's why we're doing this session today. And right up front, we already hope that you're subscribed to our newsletter. And we're also going to post a link in the summit as we're announcing our very first She Money Summit on June 6th and 7th, right here in Salt Lake City. And we'll hope you join us. So as we get into the conversation today, please post comments. If you're watching this on later, we still welcome your comments in chat. Know that we pay attention to them. We'll try to draw them into the conversation today. And we certainly appreciate you showing up. So with that, let me welcome shortly and first introduce our special guest who's going to be joining me for this conversation today about Kids Plus Money. So Dr. Jatali Bellanton is someone I quite recently. We are both investors in a new bank called Redemption Bank right here in Utah, and that's how we came to know each other. Our backgrounds really overlap, including that we're both extremely money curious. We worked in financial services and have a deep, deep passion for improving the financial well-being of others. Dr. J, as we affectionately, I do, and our team, has a PhD in neuropsychology with a focus on mental and financial health. She spent most of her career in financial services, over 20 years, working with some large institutions such as CSFB. She also founded a crypto hedge fund and has direct investments in 7 countries. The connection to the topic today, more specifically, is that she also wrote a youth financial literacy book, which serves as the base for her financial curriculums around Kids Who Bank and the Brilliant Minds Institute, which has been taught in hundreds of schools across the country. Like me, she is also a mother and, as said, has so much passion around empowering families to navigate financial conversations. With that, welcome to LinkedIn Live with She Money, Dr. J.
Cheers, everyone.
Hi, Dr. J. Oh, so excited to have you here. Well, you've got tell us where you're joining from today. I see this beautiful background behind you.
I am in White Plains, New York. I'm in Westchester, New York.
Oh, lovely. Well, thank you for joining. And I thought a great place to just start off is just to hear a little bit about your background. So I invite you to share about yourself, and especially as it relates to your passion around financial education.
So I am, as you'll hear from my accent, originally from the UK, but I've worked in corporate finance for both the US, the UK, and it's been a beautiful space to grow from investment banking side, eventually forensic accounting. And now as an entrepreneur, I have a finance curriculum that's gone into over 413 schools around the United States and growing. It has been completed. And now we're starting to branch off back into the UK, into Africa and different continents, really just making sure that financial education is not just a right for everyone, but making sure consumers understand their power. And our little consumers, like our youth, are part of the conversation as well.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And we're going to get into the curriculum in a minute, but I know it started for you with a book. So, you were doing your life, you were in financial services, and then something said, no, I'm going to stop, or it's probably not stop. You just layered in another thing. Right? You're like me. I think you're this portfolio life like I have. But how did you come to first write the book, and why that book targeted that specific age? And tell us about the book, obviously, and we'll also post it in the chat.
So, I mean, the first starting practice for me was becoming a mom. Motherhood for me was very personal because both of my parents were out of the picture by the time I was 21. My dad passed away when I was 20, maybe 4 months shy of 20 and 21. And my mom when I was younger. So having mother figure after her who was really bad with money, it always made me understand the importance of knowing how to budget, earn, save, invest. And having a dad who was really good with money, it gave me that balance of knowing both worlds. Now, fast forward as a mother, when I became a mom in 2015, I just knew that if my story was one where I was going to die young, God forbid, I wanted to be in a position where I was going to be able to leave some of that knowledge to my son. Actually, in conversation with you, I had an interesting theory, which was this was my love story to my son, right? Teaching financial knowledge to him in case I wasn't going to be able to physically, personally teach him. And so, as such, I wrote my first book, which was called Wants versus Needs. And it tackled concepts like depreciation and compound interest and cooperative investing. And it also had a variety of characters because, as a person who traveled a lot, I always thought that that aspect of having friends from around the world was very cool. And so I wanted to have characters that my son could relate to, but not only relate, but learn from. And I felt like dictionary formatted educational tools and books teaching finance were kind of boring, and I wanted to do something different. And upon finishing the book, which was originally just, I wanted to print it for my son, I spoke to a friend of mine who actually at that time worked at Morgan Stanley, and she was high up. And she said, she was a VP in one of the departments, and she said, this should be a curriculum. And she's like, I think this needs to go into every school. And I was like, I don't know how to write a curriculum. And she's like, so you're telling me you manage 3.1 billion and you can't figure out how to create a curriculum? And I was like, challenge accepted. And so
I love that. And that's one of my favorite lines. Challenge accepted. That should be on a t-shirt too. Just like money moves, right? Challenge accepted. Yes.
Okay, so I think we have the next collaboration.
Yes. Yes, so, a whole new product line.
But I'm really big on that, right? I think it's so important that we do what scares us. And when she said it, it scared me, intimidated me. This concept of having a finance curriculum, bringing it into the schools, I didn't know anything about it. And it was also exhilarating because sometimes what scares you can actually intrigue you and excite you. And that's how it started. The next thing I knew, I was creating a finance curriculum and learning from Coursera and Udemy and all these online platforms how to create a curriculum. Then I had a friend who worked for the DOE, and I was like, can you teach me about the Common Core ELA and math standards for the school systems? And so we incorporate a lot of that, or even how to test differently. And so because that was another thing, I knew that we had to do assessment testing, but I actually think that testing is kind of archaic, the regular way that people do it. I don't think it's fair because I think when they have a lot of pressure on how to test, it makes youth not perform as well. So what I did was I created financial crossword puzzles where they had incentives like an ounce of silver that they were competing for. And so they think they're competing for an ounce of silver. In reality, they're actually testing so we could assess how well they know financial literacy, and so, or how financially literate they are. And so with that, next thing you know, we had a curriculum going into the schools, and 6 years later, we've completed 413 schools around the US.
Yeah, and that's no small feat. And you brought up when we were talking about this, 20 years ago, I was in New York time, and I don't know if you remember, I want to do a history book of women and money, and this woman would be in it. Her name is Muriel Siebert, and she was the first woman to have a seat on the New York Stock Exchange. And she would wear these red cowboy boots. She was fierce, and she lived, I'm sure, well into her 80s. I have to look that up. And I know she worked so hard, and I'm not sure New York was the first one, but to get financial education curriculum into public school systems. And just to the point of it, let's introduce a few facts as we're plugging along today. In 2023, just to share, I know you know this, Dr. J, only 7 states require personal finance instruction as a requirement for graduation, and it's equal to 1 semester half-year course. And by 2028, 23 states will require personal finance courses, and that's it. So the fact that it always kind of mystifies me a little bit, not that general core curriculum, math, science, everything, humanities isn't important, but what could be more important to life than financial wellness and understanding? I'm not saying just literacy. I'm just saying it's almost a lens for which you could apply to many other things. But back to what you were saying about getting it as a curriculum. So it's also another thing to create a curriculum, but also get it into schools. So give a little bit of an overview in your opinion and your experience. And I love what you already said about gamifying things, that not making it dry and boring and just-in-time learning or some of the concepts we talked about. But love your take on the current state of financial literacy programming in the context of public education. And I know you work globally, but just anchoring it in the United States for a minute.
So the first thing I would say is that I think it's very important that we now not only make sure that even when our youth are as young as 5 years old, if they're in kindergarten, first grade, They're starting to make a lot of requests. We're giving them a star chart anyway, where we're teaching them basically incentives for them to learn how to read. Hey, you read a book for the week, you get a star. You were helping in the classroom, you did something nice for a classmate, you get a star. So the same way we make those a part of the everyday for youth, especially when we're teaching social emotional health in the school systems, I think it's really big that we start teaching them financial literacy basics. Like, hey, today you're going to budget and earn towards getting something cool. Maybe you're having a pizza week and all the kids could chip in by learning financial education, and that will get them the stars to have the pizza day on Friday, or whatever the cool thing is going to be for your particular school or your youth. But I think that it's very important that we incentivize our children to learn this, because if we don't start with the young ones, what happens? We become the adults who have issues struggling. And now that, as the curriculum has gone into the school systems, we started getting a lot of principals and teachers and parents who came to us to ask for the same formal education. And so as we're starting to talk to them, I realized that, it's very hard when you have an adult who's done something one way their whole lives to now change their stripes, right? And they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I like to believe, well, what if you're not learning, then what's the point, right? What's the point of getting up every day just to do the same thing and be mundane? So I'm always challenging myself to learn, but it's not that easy for certain people who don't have the time, between time constraints and the rat race that sometimes can be your life. Because a lot of people are go, go, go. Once you get to the point where you have a job and you're in the system and you're living check to check, it's a vicious cycle to break. So how about we just ensure that our people don't enter the cycle to begin with? In my opinion, for America to remain a powerhouse, to remain prevalent in the world, to ensure that we have consumers who are going to other countries and able to run the workforces there, it is important that our youth are financially literate. They know how to invest properly. They know how to diversify. They also understand the importance of, let's say, our stock market and our companies and corporations, and how to make money back here and keep the money flowing into the country.
Yeah, and you're agree. And I find it ironic almost that in a country that celebrates capitalism and rugged individualism, when it comes and just business and success and money, that those core beliefs are not integrated into our education system, not as the pursuit of money as the be all and end all, because I think you do, as money as a means, not an ends, though our cultural narrative might say it's an ends, not a means, right? But it just strikes me as bizarre. In Canada, I haven't actually looked into, I'm Canadian, so I was raised in the public school system in Canada. I don't remember ever taking, having a financial literacy course. I'm actually not sure about that in Canada, but it just doesn't make sense, and that we don't do better. And especially to your point, if we're a country, and let me give a few more statistics because it is Financial Literacy Month. Let me pull it in here. This is more about parents. Well, we know a lot of, you said it, something like 40% of Americans could not come up with $400 in an emergency if they need to.
More like 60%.
Well, I haven't heard that high. I'm looking for the stats. 40% of Gen Z don't know their credit score. Obviously, high levels of debt, consumer debt, student debt, more understandable, household debt, levels of bankruptcy going up. So it's also self-perpetuating, because if the parents, and again, it's that the reason people are in debt is because they're not financially educated. I think the cost of living, again, wages have not kept pace. That said, higher degrees of agency and financial education will almost always help everyone. So it's this weird kind of thing that we know we need to really care about it, and yet it's not happening. And
how can we be a powerhouse and not doing it?
Pardon me?
I said, how can we be a powerhouse and remain in power and remain successful and have a healthy economy when the people don't know how to even spend their dollars or invest their dollars wisely, right? That's my personal opinion. I feel like if we can create more money, I think it was Kennedy once said that, it's important for brown and black people, all people, to economically have more money, because if you have access to hotels and restaurants but you don't have the money to spend in those hotels and restaurants, what good is the access, right? And so if these are the things that run our world besides tourism, then why aren't we making sure that they have the money? And to have the money, realistically, it's part of that investing, the education, and knowing when to spend. Because we do have a fear culture where a lot of people are afraid to spend and invest. They will save, save, save. You can't save yourself to wealth, in my opinion.
No, well, that's definitely true. And so much to unpack around even this bigger narrative. Well, and it's why we're here. I mean, could be doing both of us could be doing a lot of different things, but just understanding that core people's well-being is financial well-being. So let's connect this more into the topic today around kids. There's no doubt, and I think we already made the connection, if as an adult you have lower levels of financial education or financial wellness, you're uncomfortable talking about money, the whole area of financial trauma, which we've talked about a little bit, that we've gone into deep around this here at She Money. I've mentioned a few times, and maybe we can pop it in the chat, the certification course that I'm taking right now with Chantel Chapman called The Trauma of Money. It's my personal belief that a lot of what gets in the way of financial engagement is financial trauma that is more prevalent or prominent in certain demographics, certainly in the United States. People of color, women, are more likely to have different forms of financial trauma, which gets in the way of even engaging around education. But assume that the intent is there, assuming that anyone listening to this or is saying, yes, I know it's important. I have kids. I want to do better with my children, maybe than I even did for myself. Talk a little bit about how you think about raising financially well children and your philosophy around that. And let's get into some sort of practical tips and tools. And I just encourage anyone, there's multiple ways that people are viewing this right now, but please feel free to post questions if you are here into the chat, because our team is going to feed them into the conversation. So back to you, Dr. J.
So one of the first things I'll say, I have a 9-year-old. So as a mom, ironically, in 2019, I became the New York State Mother of the Year. And I remembered receiving it because, which was it was cool. They've honored Jackie Kennedy and a lot of illustrious names. And when I received it, I was like, wait, what? And, so I digress. So going back into it, when I received this award, it was because I went to the supermarket with my son. He wanted almond milk. And I don't even live in Brooklyn, but I was in Brooklyn, and this woman was with her daughter, and her daughter goes, Mom, that's the woman who taught me about couponing. And her daughter was about 6 years old. And I remember that the mom was like, oh my God, do you live in Brooklyn? I was like, no. And, she was just like, wow, I'd love to honor you and nominate you for an award. I had no idea what the award was. And it was just to go to show the woman pulled out a book of coupons and was like, my daughter would not allow me to leave the house without these coupons. And she's like, now I've saved so much money, I'm a big couponer. And it's just one way and one example of how just something simple like couponing can save you money and it's getting your child started, right? Because honestly, it's not that our children can't grab their heads around this concept. Your children are as smart as you make them or as dumb as you make them, in my opinion, right? Because if you don't instill the values in them, then you can't expect them to have the values. And so even with my son, when he was 2.5, his dad and I sat down and we said, he has a Hot Wheel addiction. We're like, every time we go to the supermarket, he wants to get a Hot Wheel. What are we going to do about this? And I remember saying we need to put him on a budget. And I was like, and we need to include him in the budget. And he was like, in what way? And so I remember we created this connection where he had to earn all of his Hot Wheels by cleaning up his toys. So, I like to joke, if you ever come to my house, you'll see 300 plus Hot Wheels cars, but my son has actually earned 280 of them. Right. And, he's actually worked his way towards buying them. And now that he's 9, he's kind of like, well, I want more expensive toys. So I'm like, well, if you want more expensive toys, you have to forego purchasing every Hot Wheel car that you think is cool. And so he started to actually put his money together and save towards the more expensive items. And so it becomes a mindset, right? It becomes a conversation. Even when we had big goals for his birthday, he said he wanted to go to Miami for his birthday. He actually said Miami and Dubai. And I was like, you have to pick a country, pick one. And then he was like, okay, Miami, because I have more cousins there. And I said, okay, great. And so I made it a thing where it's like, okay, although it's your birthday present, you have to work towards the Miami trip. And we created a chart where it's like, okay, this week, we're not going to go to the movies because that $30 is going to go towards the Miami trip, And I remembered him making a joke like, well, do we really have to budget towards it? Are we rich? And I was like, your dad and your mom have money, but you don't have money yet. And he's like, well, I have stocks. And I'm like, yeah, money that one day we will pass on to you, but has not been given to you yet. And he's like, so why am I picking my stocks? I'm like, so that one day when we pass it on to you, you have a lot of wealth. And so it's just little conversations like that, letting him understand that he still has to work towards his wealth. Also, even the stocks conversation, I remember sitting him down and saying, what companies do you like the most? And he was like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, what do you wear the most? Some companies are publicly traded on the stock market, which means you can own a percentage of that company and own equity in the company. And he's like, what's equity? I'm like, it's ownership. And then, so we started having these conversations. So from the age of 4, my son started actually picking his stocks that are in his portfolio. One point Tesla was in it. Then he woke up one day, he said, I like American Muscle. I'm not a big fan of electric vehicles. There's a lot of glitches in them. He was like, can I sell all my companies that are electric vehicle companies? I said, well, it's your portfolio. So if that's what you want to do, no problem. And, so that became a shift, right? Letting him know that his opinions are valid, and also allowing him to be a part of the story and the conversation. And then when Tesla went down in value, he was like, look, mom, Tesla went down in value. But now even on his YouTube, he's paying attention to conversations around what is performing, how are things performing. He's looking at his Apple stock because he's like, well, since mom, you have an iPhone and I have an iPad, can I buy this company? I'm like, it is on the stock market. So it becomes a conversation. And I think it just starts right there. Even with crypto, teaching him the difference between a meme crypto coin and an actual crypto coin that has utility and function. So now he's like, hey, which ones do I own? How are they performing? Should I be buying more or selling it? But he's only 9 years old, and these are the conversations that we're having. And so I think that it becomes your normal.
Yeah, I think what becomes your normal, I mean, I just want to acknowledge that for a lot of folks, even having, a 9-year-old have an investment portfolio of their own is just acknowledging the privilege that both you and I clearly have, even to this conversation. But that being said, what you're saying, which I love, is connecting sort of the learning about money with something that's relevant for them in their lives. And I think that's such a challenge with financial education generally, is these abstract concepts that just don't apply to one's everyday lives and the trade-offs that we have to make. It's why, and we're thinking about doing this like a children's book that, age appropriate learning around the money moves, because we talk about, as you did, there's 7, right? And there maybe sort of more. Earn. How do you embed money lessons around earning? That you earn is what you get paid when you do work. So kids do work all the time. They do extra projects to make money. Borrow. I mean, obviously parents borrow money probably to buy the house that they live in. Well, the kid needs something today that they don't have. Well, maybe you can borrow, but then you have to pay me back. But what is interest? How do you think of that? Obviously, saving, we could go through lessons around that. That is the most common thing we can teach our kids. And this is why I love Jolene Godfrey's original work, because she basically said, kids, think about save, spend, give, as just a classic 3-bucket, 3-little jar activity with, this is not real money. You can even do it with play money. I mean, I grew up playing cashier. I mean, and then I ended up as a cashier. So let's just talk about that. But people don't have money anymore, right? So that's another practice, is using real cash instead of debit cards and credit cards, because it feels, just more tangible, right? So
I will also say, sorry to interject, but I will say 2 things, right? One, I want to rewind to one thing. When we talk about the privilege that we have, I think the biggest privilege we have is knowledge, right? Because half the knowledge, and I'm going to share this knowledge with everyone here. I don't care how much money you make. If you spend $20 on a pizza pie for your kid, that might have been a pizza pie you could have made for $10 by buying the flour and just making that extra time, and take that extra $10 to start their portfolio. Every kid, every parent, every adult should have a portfolio, and you can. I think sometimes we think it's more expensive than it actually is. You can create a brokerage account by yourself. You don't actually need to, most brokerage accounts are free. You don't necessarily need a wealth manager. If you can afford one, that's the privilege, right? But everyone can afford to open up a brokerage account if you have an internet. If you have a computer or phone and the capabilities to read the lineup, or if you need help, then reach out to somebody. Maybe someone will take a few minutes to help you go through the questions and actually set up your brokerage account. And then once you have that, there are particular brokerages that allow you to buy partial shares of a stock. You don't always have to buy a full share of a stock, or maybe just buying the stock that is $20, $30 versus the ones that cost $1,000, $2,000, $30,000, right? Even the same for crypto. Most all crypto, you can buy partial shares of a coin. So if you're into Bitcoin, Ethereum, etc., not to tell you to buy those, but if you were into it, you could buy $10 worth of it and dollar cost average your way into it. So, instead of that extra cup of Starbucks, put that into your investing in your portfolio for your child or yourself. So I just want to make sure that privilege that we talk about is honestly knowledge. Taking the minute to go on YouTube, come here on LinkedIn and watch She Money and learn about your financial capabilities and your access. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, and I more or less agree with you. I don't try not to say should. Everyone should, because that should be on a t-shirt too. No shitting on people. But what I agree with what you said is that a lot of people think that they need more money than they do to start investing, and that there's some point of arrival when you suddenly have enough when investing makes sense. Because you and I both know sort of the biggest lesson around investing, the biggest thing is time. So if you start early, even with small amounts of money, that money, to your point, has the opportunity to grow. And that's where I think, again, that financial education comes in, and a framework that makes it accessible and demystifying these processes, because it wasn't, 30 years ago, a lot of this wasn't true, right? Mm-hmm. To your point, there's now platforms now that make investing so low cost and so accessible to everyone. And even small amounts of money can grow. And with that commitment and seeing that money grow and evolve, you build confidence. And I think of money, I think I told you I was a bodybuilder in my younger years, but I'm like, build your money. Oh, I didn't tell you that. Okay. I can flex for you. I have a shirt on. Is thinking of money as a muscle, right? And even your kids, like, we think about activities around your mental well-being, physical well-being, going out and running around the block or playing. And if we think of money, skills, and capabilities as more of a muscle, this idea that you're going to build strength and core strength, and I love the word capability, if you practice it and regularly talk about it. So you talked about, again, getting more sort of in the practical space, investing. I think we both absolutely agree that get started early. There's no time like the present. Talk a little bit about some of the other sort of categories, if you want to frame it in money moves or not, but especially as it relates to your curriculum and getting it out there into, I would say, the public school system. Like, how do you think in general, maybe we can do that better? And to your point, gamify some of that, but the home is one place to learn. School system, public education is another place to learn. Let's focus on that for a minute in terms of, again, what you think has made your curriculum so popular and hopefully so impactful.
So I will say the first thing I noticed is our engagement with our youth. Between, like I mentioned earlier, how we have financial crossword puzzles, which makes us unique. We also have like a wants versus needs survival sheet where it's the challenge where the kids, all the youth, the way it looks like these kids have landed on a deserted island, and each child's only going to be allowed, or a team, because sometimes we make it a team environment. So each team is allotted 10 items, and they're going to have to survive on these 10 items until they can have a rescue team pick them up. And so, like, even a challenge like that, most youth will pick batteries, but then the other 9 items that they pick don't utilize batteries, right? Because we have like a solar powered TV and we have a cracked mansion that you can live in. And so what ends up happening, you realize that things that you sometimes think you need are not a need, they're a want, right? Because you're just so used to having them. And so we like to challenge our youth in that mannerism. And I think that's what sticks us out separately from other programs. And as well, we're also happy to collaborate with other financial literacy programs. It's not always only about us, right? Because, for instance, our course is a 9 to 10 course program, and each module will tackle certain conversations. But if a school wants us to, like, let's say when we talk about real estate investing for youth and young adults, like college students, we only do one workshop on it. And sometimes schools are like, well, can you do 8 workshops on it? There are other programs that are actually teaching children financial literacy when it comes to real estate and how to invest in real estate at young ages. And so then I would team up with someone else. And that's another thing I think is really great, is just knowing the power of cooperatively teaching our youth, because maybe something I am doing will be amazing. Like, we have a business plan fair. So instead of a science fair, we created a business plan fair. It's one of my favorite things that we do. The youth get to compete for like like some kind of a digital device, or sometimes a gift card to like their favorite store. And one time we had Target, someone donated Target cards for the youth, and they were all competing towards getting this gift card, right? And one thing I've learned in our program as well, we try our best to create either panels, representation. All of our professors, they come from financial backgrounds. So a lot of them have worked for Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, Credit Suisse, UBS, a lot of the major institutions that we hear about. So we're seeing now representation of people who are in this space, who live this life, who manage a certain amount of wealth, or have the same amount of wealth for themselves now. And we're watching them come into the school systems and learn our program, and actually now related to the youth. And so I think that also sticks us out differently. But what's fun about it, because it's the kids come to us and go, can we talk about marketing and branding today? I see that everyone's an Instagram influencer. I don't want to be in front of the screen, but how do I make that same kind of money from behind the screen? Or what is play to earn? Right now, there's video games in the metaverse where they can play games and actually make real life money. So, they're asking these questions, they want to know it. And we're just making sure that we're real life showing them, these are the games in the metaverse. This is how you're safe in that space. These are what it looks like to be airdropping at a young age. Oh, you like to collect sneakers? This is how you could flip those sneakers that you like to collect. Wait, you wear this brand of kicks? It only costs $1 to $5 to make these sneakers. You're paying for marketing and branding. And now it starts to make them excited to learn about what it looks like to be a consumer in the world that we live in, because now they realize how powerful their dollars are and how they're actually driving the market, and how when they stand together they can bring a company down, or when they don't really do anything, how that looks like for a company. If you're not buying, and it doesn't matter how much someone wants to sell it for. And so I think these are like important concepts that we really go in with. And then even just college students talking about compound interest. You get to the age of college, most youth don't realize that, most parents don't know they could start building their youth credit from young. So now there's companies, not to co-sign any particular brand, but now you could be 6 years old and your parents can open up a credit card to start building your credit. So when we talk about the tangible cash aspect, well, so many people are not utilizing cash, but you can put your child's allowance on a credit card and start building their allowance by building their credit score by putting it on a credit card, right? So this is like one of the hacks that I like to utilize. So by the time they're in college, their APR might be in compound interest will be more in their favor. Their APR will be lower because they'll start with a 700 credit score versus a 500 credit score. And, especially if you build it properly, you pay it on time and you're not utilizing and abusing it. And you allow your child to also learn about, hey, there are disadvantages of trying to overspend on your card. Or, hey, if you spend your whole allowance in one shot, there's no more money coming your way. So, and it's sticking to that, right? Unless it's necessary to give them more. But I think that's another part that we, even in the school systems, we enforce with our youth.
Yeah, what you're saying to me is so creative, and this making it relevant, right? Just making it relevant and seeing the money. Again, I'm just going to point at my shirt this whole time, because kids make money moves every single day. We all make money moves every single day. Every time, to your point, we buy a product or a service. We do it by deciding we're going to have, the Starbucks versus putting it in our savings account. We do it buying one brand of sneaker versus another. And I think, too, as you said, the world that we live in today it's really different. I'm almost 60 than when I grew up, to the point of, you used to have lemonade stands. Now I don't think there are lemonade stands. I don't think most parents would. Maybe it's a little paranoid of me, like have their little small children sitting on the side of the road for people to pull over and buy lemonade. That we do have that sometimes, I guess, here in my town of Park City. But to your point, there's creative ways, and not to turn everything into about money and making money and all of that, but how do you embed these lessons and this deeper understanding about how the world works, which is, to your point, driven by financial resources. And this core concept, I gave a talk yesterday, a keynote address, and it was called Money Matters. And to understand the phrase I led with is money is not optional. And we all know that. And yet how to build it to your point, in these creative ways that kids are engaging and curious about. And so just because you brought it up, I'm so curious about some of these other creative ways, and if there are others, where people are getting financial education. But this whole idea of influencers, because I don't see it in my stack, but something that, I don't know if it's Gen Z or even that younger generation, is getting most of their financial knowledge from influencers. And I'm sure you have thoughts about that. So just curious how you think about that as a source of financial education for kids, for youth, as you say, and what you see as the pros and cons of that.
So, I mean, one of the cons about it is because a lot of those influences are regurgitating truths that they've heard that they don't even know if it's factual or not. And I've seen some TikToks and things that I was just like, that's not bloody true. And it's not that easy. Or, sometimes I'm, especially my nieces and nephews, they'll come, and at least now they have me. So they'll be like, Auntie, is this true? And I'm like, no, it's not. Like, that's just complete rubbish. That's a lie. And so they fact check with me, but not everyone has someone that they can fact check with. So that is always a concern for me. I know now we're using chat box and things of that nature to kind of help with fact checking. I've noticed my nieces and nephew now, that's another thing that they do, right? They'll I can teach them something and they'll be like, is that true? And they'll go on their mobile and they'll start typing in, is it true that X, Y, and Z? And they're waiting for Google to give them the answer, or some kind of a digital AI to help them. But what's scary about it is because you have these people who aren't actual experts, who haven't even lived the life that they're saying. There was an expose showing people pretending that they're going onto yachts, and they're like, or going onto like private jets. Meanwhile, they're like, okay, you didn't actually take a flight on it. It was just a photo shoot at a private jet, and then you have a whole generation of people just aspiring to be them. So that is a little scary to me. Because not everything you see, of course, online is true. And we've been saying this for years. Not everything you see on TV is true. Not everything on the internet is correct. And so that's my biggest concern with it. But fast forward. And then another thing is someone like myself and you, I'm about to be teen 40. You're in your 60s and you're like, I don't know.
No,
about
I'm
you,
not in my 60s. I'm not in my 60s. We're going to have to correct that. I'm almost 60. Thank you, Dr. J.
So you're in your 50s. Okay. So, I mean, I was like, I thought I was in my 50s. I thought she was in her 50s. Okay, I'm wrong. But yeah, so, so when we look at like our age group, I don't know about you, but I'm not really trying to be on TikTok. I don't want to do all these dances and all of that. I'm like, that's just not me. I don't have any interest in it. But I am more of a LinkedIn, Instagram person. I don't mind being on that. Even then, I'm horrible at engagement. I think, Jackie, you're inspirational when I see how much you engage your LinkedIn community. And I'm looking at myself like, what? I need to set my game up. But that is my biggest concern. But what I will say is that it is important that you do have She Money and projects where you actually are posting live and we are giving information from people who are actual experts in this space. And I think that's also where the school systems jumping into the game better, more aggressively is important. Because, the same way we teach these educators about science and global studies and everything else, I think that it's important that we're teaching them financial education and we're making sure that they know what's happening. But it all becomes relatable the more we talk about it, because look at this situation with the NILs, these kids wake up one day with—
I don't know if people know what that is.
Okay, so NIL, it stands for name, image, and likeness. And right now, there was a long time where a lot of athletes in particular in the school systems, rather were high school athletes or college students, rather they went to Notre Dame or whatever the location was, their name, image, and likeness were utilized for games like Madden, etc. And they weren't receiving any payment for it. Their only payment was the fact that they were getting an education for free. And which is something also that could be taken from them if they didn't keep a certain level of GPA, or they got injured, and now they could no longer be an athlete. So now this new NIL situation, the government passed a law stating that they can get paid and get endorsement deals for that, for someone using their name, image, and likeness. And so these youth, some of them might be one day $100 underneath a bank or in under their bed, and the next day, and some of them don't even have bank accounts, because there's a high number of people who don't even have bank accounts, especially when it comes to our youth. And they wake up from not having a bank account to now one day waking up to now they're in a position where they might have a $3 million deal, and no one's ever taught them about money, investing, saving, budgeting, or even how to properly house that money, or what kind of account to house that money in. And so, or now they need wealth managers, or now they're trying to buy survivor's guilt. They want to buy everybody a mansion because, hey, you were all my friends. But in reality, that's a lot of debt that you're incurring really quickly. And there's good debt, there's bad debt. But who's having the conversation around good and bad debt? And so I think it's very important that we're having these conversations. We have these podcasts, and there's a few podcasts that I'm particular that I love because of it. She Money is definitely part of the project, and the community of people that I feel like are moving the right direction.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I agree to this piece. And please, we don't see everything because people are on multiple platforms, but we have people looking. If you have a question, please feel free to post it in the, make sure that we get to it. But, a couple of things that you said in terms of where people go and the credibility of information, I think that's such a huge issue. I mean, I have a long history in finance. I think I know a lot. I think I challenged myself to do 100 financial literacy cards. I don't know if you can see this, Dr. J. But I'm like, damn, I got those. Thumbs up. I think I got all of them. But I studied finance. I had a career in finance. I'm money curious. I've read 5 million books on finance and money, but I'm unusual. I'm still not certified. And I think the credentials but I will say, just because you're certified doesn't make you necessarily a great person to give advice. I think it's really tricky, but I love what you said, to have someone to fact check with. And the idea that we can normalize, that's what we're doing here in She Money, is normalize conversations. And, I love the tagline that I think Brene Brown, it's about shame, but Trauma of Money has, like, decrease shame, increase discernment. And when it comes to money, and especially relationships between kids and parents and money, if within the household, there's a lot of financial shame for whatever, or denial, and in Trauma of Money, they use these terms called disruptions, which is, behaviors that are not advancing your financial well-being, then of course you're not going to probably talk about it. But kids are going to notice that and shut up. So let's say in the home, maybe they're not picking up or engaging. So they go to the school and there's very limited educational opportunities. People are not talking about it. Maybe what they see about it is more sort of performative wealth, kind of thing, but not understanding the connections to, that's what I might want to get, but how do I get there? And how do I understand that it's hard work, it's saving, it's investing, it's being smart about debt. So all of this, to your point, we just have to get it in everywhere and anywhere we can, and embed these micro learnings and conversations. And, change starts here, right? Change starts there. Change starts everywhere we are. But if parents don't model that, and in the public school system, if the teachers that teach it are perhaps not themselves financially well, have not been taught how to teach it, it's just this vicious cycle. And
it's so hard to train
the teachers.
And
it's to your point, it's one thing. It's a million different things that are going to help.
100%. And that's also why we picked professors who came from a finance background. Either they were still in the corporate space and they want to do this on their free time, after school programming, or those who have retired from the corporate space but are like, I still want to teach people financial literacy. Because when I first started to try to teach teachers this information, it was kind of like going over their heads. And we also have youth who are very cheeky. And so they will say things like, are you wealthy? Why are you teaching me this about money? And so it also becomes a hard conversation, right? Like, have you managed wealth before? Why are you teaching me this? And so we also have such a generation of freedom thinkers who are very outspoken. And I know that also does not help when having conversations like this with our little ones. And so it's been a beautiful transition to see that more of us are talking about these things now. And but I also realize that we still have a long way to go. when it comes to this, because for so long, I feel like children are to be seen and not heard, and we weren't allowed to ask questions. I mean, when I was growing up, there weren't a lot of questions I was allowed to ask about certain things. And I was thankful that I had my dad to at least talk to these and have these conversations. But my grandmother was very traditional, old Italian, and she was kind of like, children are kind of to be seen and not heard when it comes to adult conversations around money or budgeting or anything. And if there was a bill, it wasn't something that I knew anything about. I was able to see. So now, like, letting our kids know, like, wait, we do have bills. We have to pay for the electric and the gas, letting them know that these are real life expenses, and telling them about the utilities. Even just something so simple like that makes such a difference, right? Because they might be like, well, you go to work so much. Why don't we have more money to play with? Well, guess what? The electricity that you use to play your video games, it costs money. And the heat that you utilize so you're not freezing cold, it costs money. And so just teaching them these concepts, I think, are so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think about that. My mind is going back into some of my trauma of my classroom settings, because people who show up to that in that space are incredibly open and vulnerable about their money experiences. And so a lot of our therapists learning to learn more about money, and a lot of financial professionals learning to look more about trauma. And then there's folks that are dealing with their own and trying to come at it from a more personal journey, from healing with their own financial trauma. And to be clear, what I'm defining as trauma, there's a lot of definitions, but it could be financial abuse, a sudden change of financial condition. It could be related to growing up, obviously, in poverty, identity-based financial trauma, being excluded from systems that allow opportunity for wealth creation. And it's been so enlightening, because I see stories that are taught, like denial, for example. There are a lot of people in the class, especially kids that grow up in wealthy environments, where they know there's a lot of money, but you don't really talk about it, but they're not sure about it. And they can be even shamed around it. And on the one hand, so how do you teach kids that might have more, kind of what, and things like, we can't afford that. How many times have we had that? And for a lot of families, that's true, but a lot of families, it's not true. So it's not about using the word afford it, because that's misrepresenting or lying. So this idea of what you share with kids, and oppositely, when a family, for a lot of reasons beyond their education, go through financial challenges, and my parents did. I actually recently talked to my mom about it, because we had a sudden change in financial situation when I was young, and my parents we had to move away from our home. We had to go into a rental. They used all the money that we had in equity for a home to buy a business. And I look back on that time now, and they borrowed money at 22% interest. This was in the early 80s. That would make sense. And I talked to my mom about this, and I said, Mom, she goes, yeah, it was hard. It was bad. It was really, really scary. And they built a business around it, but they protected us from the amount of stress, because, it's not about putting stress on kids either. So there's age appropriate levels. And that's why the resources, and how, even as a community of parents, moms, how we talk to each other and get each other's advice and support. Divorce is another huge one. What percentage of families end up in divorce? And then all of a sudden you have kids in one situation where maybe one parent is living very differently than the other parent. So they're confused, and there's financial fawning happening, where you just buy love with money. So this is quicksand material that none of us were not naturally trained to know how to navigate this. So I just want to put that out there, and we have a couple minutes left. And again, if there are questions,
I add one thing to that part of the conversation?
It's complicated. Yes.
I will say one of the things. So I recently did a panel, and we were discussing the new age of relationships, divorce, dating, all of that. And as a parent, especially in particular, the balance of it all. One of my favorite things is baby nuptials. So the same way when you're on good terms, you do a prenuptial. It's the best time to do a prenup, because guess what? We're the best friends right now, right? So let's make this plan while we're on the same page. Same for baby nuptials. When you have a child and you are in a position to sit down with them and plan out, these conversations. Well, God forbid if we have a divorce, or if only one of us survives and one of us passes away, are we going to have a living trust? Do we believe in financially, like, are we going to set a budget each month that is a max that we could spend on our kids? If we do divorce and we feel like we have this survivor's guilt of we're not together, we want to spoil our children. Do you agree on how far away you can move with that child? So these are conversations that we can actually legally plan out, and have something in place to, actually hopefully make that part of the conversation a little bit easier. So I want to throw that out there for anyone who has had that question, that problem, especially when it comes to divorce aspect of raising a child with someone. While things are good, you can start making these plans.
Yes. And again, it gets so complicated so fast when it comes to money, but the key is talking about it and having agreements. And as couples, as you said, and I see it with young people, even navigating kind of the dating scene, who pays for what, and what if you're dating someone and or even a friend group and you're suggesting activities to do that cost a lot of money where some people might not be able to afford it. If we don't talk about these things, we don't build that awareness within our children. One, if perhaps they can't afford to do things, how to navigate those situations without feeling embarrassment or shame or whatever those are, because money does get in the way.
Or even nepotism, that's a big part of the conversation. I know I have friends who, because they've reached a certain level of success, they're like, well, I don't want my child to feel like they're entitled to it. But then if you put your child in a school, in my personal opinion, if your child goes to a school with all the kids wearing a certain brand, they're living a certain lifestyle, and these are their peers, and then you're like, well, you're going to walk to 5 miles to school, because I had to walk 5 miles to schools. I'm not sure if I quite believe and agree with that, right? I think it's okay for you to get your child an internship capability. Just make sure your child can actually do the job and will actually earn that internship. And when they go to interview, will do their best and put their best foot forward and win it the right way. But if you have a friend, instead of telling them, well, you have to go work at McDonald's, because I had to work at McDonald's, I don't think that's fair, in my personal opinion. But, to each parent their own. You have to see what's best for you in raising your child. But I do feel like sometimes nepotism can be healthy. And even having that conversation as a parent with your spouse or your partner becomes, hey, when our child is of age to get a job one day, what do we think about nepotism? Do we think it's okay to at least get them an opportunity to intern in a bigger location because we've worked and created these bonds and relationships? And so the gamut gets so deep.
Oh, it's such a rich topic. And I'm just looking at the time, knowing that we're going to have close. I think we barely scratched surface. It's made me thinking, and I brought some, besides your books, like grab some money books. I went back to we all agreed that we all call it the Bernstein Bears, but it's not what it's called. It's Bernstein Bears. Some of these books are so dated, but I really try to order everything about money. We have bookshelves full of stuff. And I'm not saying books are kind of the right source, but they can be. But the more, I think what we both agree on is, well, we agree on a lot of things, but talk about money, bring it in, be comfortable, of course, dealing with your own financial wellness and lives, but being intentional around building these money conversations and money actions into so many aspects of your child's life. So critically important. And just like mental health, physical health, you are going to set them up, hopefully, for a lifetime of success, the more those lessons come in early. So before we close, any last thing from you, Dr. J, before I close this out?
You all are consumers, and as consumers, you should learn your strengths, your weaknesses, and figure out how to play this game called life when it comes to money in correlation to it. And so if you guys have questions, please reach out. I'd be more than happy to answer basic questions. I think mentorship is great, whether it's for your youth or for yourself when it comes to money. And utilize your skills, your natural skills, to barter and get to your next level and unlock your next level.
Oh, thank you for that wise counsel. And we're doing so many events here at She Money. The next one during Financial Literacy Month next week at this time is Money Plus Divorce. with Jill Coyle, as mentioned. Then we have one more, Money Plus Fertility. But just thank you, Dr. J. It's such a joy to be a new friend of yours. I know we're going to spend more time together here in Utah and outside of Utah. And thank you for the work that you're doing, just the passion you bring to this space. And I think we're going to put on some music to close out. I think you recommended that. What's the name of the song again?
I Can by Nas.
I Can by Nas. We'll close out with that, everyone. Have a great day. Bye, Dr. J. Thank you. Money moves. Thank you.